What are the physics involved?
So there's five fundamental observables that, when put in the totality of this phenomenon, really help us appreciate why this is something that is certainly not our own technology. And so the first one is instantaneous acceleration, the ability to go from point A to point B and change directions fairly rapidly. To put that into context, the average human being can withstand about 9G forces for a short period of time before we start experiencing negative biological consequences, redouts, blackouts, etc. To put that into contrast, an F-16, which is one of our most highly maneuverable aircraft, can perform about 17 Gs before you start having structural failure. Wings begin to snap off. The objects we're seeing are doing 3, 4, 5, 600 Gs. Obviously well beyond the healthy limitations of anything to withstand. The next observable is hypersonic velocity. So let's take this pen again, and this is our airplane. Hypersonic velocities are those speeds that are described at Mach 5 or above. Now, we do have aircraft that can do that, and we have some missiles and some technology. The space shuttle, for example, to get to escape velocity would have to go much faster than that. The SR-71 can, let's say, at 3,200 miles an hour, if it wanted to make a left-hand turn, would take about half the state of Ohio to do it. And yet the things we're seeing are doing not 3,200 miles an hour, but 8, 9, 10, 11,000 miles an hour in our low atmosphere and able to do these crazy right angle turns. So that's something pretty obviously.
And you saw this. You saw this.
Yes.
You witnessed this. And that's how you're able to calculate the speeds and maneuverabilities, is because you saw things move that fast.
Well, we calculated through also additional information. So it wasn't just seeing is believing. It's through radar data. There is historical radar data that we have that goes many decades, where these things have been clocked doing 13, 14, 15,000 miles an hour, not just by one radar, multiple radars. The third observable is a bit of an oxymoron, but it's low observability. Now, to put that into perspective, we spend billions of dollars on a single B-2 bomber, just so it's a little bit harder to see on radar. And you can still see it with the naked eye pretty easily. Yet, what we're seeing here are things where the pilots that are trained observers are saying, Lou, I saw it, but I don't know how to describe it because it didn't look like anything we had. It doesn't have wings, doesn't have cockpits, rivets, tails, ailerons, elevators, none of that. And yet, there it is. The fourth observable is something we call transmedium travel, which is now only being discussed, but it's been one of the observables for a while. So let's take our analogy. Here's our plane again. A plane looks like a plane because it has to fly. So you have a nose, you have a tail, you have a rudder, you have elevators and ailerons, and you have a jet engine. And yet a rocket ship, which spends most of its time in a vacuum environment, a jet engine's useless, so are wings. So it has a chemical rocket engine, and it has thrusters to maneuver in space. And compared to a submarine, which is not a jet or a rocket, because it's underwater, it has a propeller to mechanically displace water, and it uses buoyancy to go up and down. And whenever we try to make a vehicle or something to operate in multiple environments, multiple domains, there's always a design compromise. So let's take a seaplane. A seaplane can fly and it can float, but let's be honest, it's neither a really good plane nor a really good boat. It's a compromise. And yet the things that we're seeing are able to operate in our atmosphere, low Earth atmosphere, high Earth atmosphere, Earth orbit, and seemingly underwater without compromising any of their design characteristics or performance parameters. So that is very significant. And then last but not least, the last observable is what one might call positive lift or anti-gravity. Now, I don't mean anti-gravity in the weird, woo-woo sense. I mean, there's only three fundamental ways that we understand how to defy Earth's gravity. The first one is through flight. So you have four fundamental forces. You have thrust, lift, drag, and weight. And when you know how to manipulate those, you have flight. You have an airplane. You have wings. Another way to defy Earth's gravity is through sheer ballistics. I can blow something with enough energy out of a tube where it will go up. Like think of a mortar, think throwing a baseball, think of an ICBM, where it will go up and then eventually come back down. And then the last way we know how to defy Earth's gravity is through lighter than air. Think of a hot air balloon, think of helium or hydrogen, where the air density inside is less than the air density outside, so it floats. It rises much like oil and water. And yet these things have no wings. They have no obvious signs of propulsion. They don't even look like anything we have. And yet somehow they're able to defy Earth's gravity. And so when you have all of those observables being displayed by a single technology, one begins to realize very quickly that is certainly a paradigm shift to what we're used to dealing with.
Okay. So how much data has been, the public has heard of Nimitz, GoFast, Gimbal, a few other cases just recently in the last few weeks. Probably you could count on two hands. How much is there?
There's a lot. there's significant amount of data. I'm not at liberty to say how much, but enough where I think classified information being provided to certain people, they've come to the same conclusion that we did. And by the way, this information comes in on a regular basis. This isn't anecdotal, happening in the Nimitz and then happened with the Roosevelt and then happened with the kid. This is occurring all the time. You're just hearing about those incidents. It hasn't stopped. So, let's not fool ourselves. People say, well, there's only been 3 incidents and some videos. Well, yeah, that you know of. Sure. You're right. There's a whole lot more too. And in time, hopefully those will come out too.
How often is this happening?
Well, it's hard to say because sometimes there's moments of lots of activity and sometimes there's not, but I would suffice it to say, weekly, if not certainly monthly.
A theory within the intelligence community, within the DoD, is that these UAP could be originating from the world's oceans. Could you speak to that?
It's possible. We don't know. They seem to be around water an awful lot. We know very little about our oceans. We know more about the moon than we do the deepest parts of our ocean. Every time we ascribe a quality of what life should be, right, like photosynthesis, nature proves us wrong. Look at chemosynthesis and the life that exists in the deepest parts of our ocean near black smokers. That life is very much alive, and yet it doesn't rely on photosynthesis the way we do up here. And so the fact that we know very little about our oceans, I think one has to keep at least it open as an option that there may be some congruencies between water and UAP activity. There certainly seems anecdotally to be some relationship there.
There are a lot of cases either above, near, or even under the water of these UAP. Why? What's water? What are what's a theory regarding UAP and their relationship to water?
Well, I would defer to some of my colleagues who are qualified to talk about physics, but it's been proposed that without going into a whole lot of detail, water may be some sort of simplistic fuel source. When you look at what water is comprised of, primarily hydrogen and oxygen, if you wanted to get a yield of energy, cracking the atom is one way to do it. And the smaller you go into the world of the atom, the more tightly that energy is packaged within the atom and subatomic particles of an atom. And so, if you want to warp space-time, some have theorized that you need a lot of energy. There's 2 ways to warp space-time: a lot of mass or a lot of energy. And it turns out that you need a lot of energy to do it. And if one wanted to harness that energy, perhaps one of the most efficient ways is through hydrogen. Now, of course, I could go out, I guess, in outer space and mine it in a nebula, but out in space, it's not dense. It may take you a very long time to do that. Whereas here on Earth, hydrogen, when it's connected with oxygen, it becomes extremely dense. You have this thing called water, H2O, where you have an abundant amount of hydrogen, more hydrogen. I remember the conversation very well. This is a person I respected tremendously, very, very senior person. He's told me, he said, "Lou, I want you to stop doing this." I said, "Okay, sir, I certainly can, but may I ask why?" And he says, "Well, we already know what it is." Now, at that moment, I honestly thought maybe it was our own technology. I was running up against some super uber secret sap, and they were telling me to stop. And I said, "Okay, sir, so it's ours?" And he said, "No, that's not what I'm saying." And he said, he asked me point blank, "Have you read your Bible lately?" And I wasn't quite sure where he was going with that. And I said, well, sir, I think I know what it says. Where are you going with this? And he said, well, then you would know that these things are demonic and we should not be pursuing them. Yeah. And, he wasn't kidding. That's exactly how he felt.
So this is a Pentagon, this is a Department of Defense official, saying, stop looking at UFOs because they're demonic.
Correct.
But if something demonic is flying over our skies, wouldn't religious people want to fight them?
Well, I think, look, I think no matter what it is, we need to figure it out. And, there was a time, and this is, look, I'm a religious person, but, there was a time where the church wouldn't even look through the telescope of Galileo because, it conflicted with their narrative, only to, years later, them to come out and actually now, use the grandeur of the universe to support their philosophical and theological belief systems. So the government has come out and established for the record these are real. We are over the Rubicon on that. That has occurred. In the last 3 years, the government has said UAPs are real. We have established a task force. We are providing a report to Congress. They're receiving classified briefings. This is whatever it is real.